Today, we're diving into one of the most essential teachings in Buddhism, one that cuts to the very heart of the Buddha's wisdom. This teaching is simple, yet profoundly deep, and it comes to us through the Dharmapada, one of the most widely read and revered texts in Buddhist tradition. The Dharmapada contains 423 verses spread across 26 chapters, and today, we'll focus on the teaching from the 14th chapter, known as the Buddha. In this chapter, the Buddha distills his teachings into 3 core points: avoid all evil deeds, cultivate the good, and cleanse the mind. These 3 pieces of advice are not just ethical guidelines, but serve as a roadmap for a peaceful, meaningful life. Let's unpack each one, starting with the first: avoid all evil deeds. The Buddha understood something crucial about the human condition. He knew that our minds are often fertile ground for negativity. It's easy to slip into anger, jealousy, hatred, or selfishness. These emotions arise naturally and can quickly take root, driving our actions in ways that harm ourselves and others. Think about it. How often does anger flare up in your mind, sometimes without any apparent cause, or how easily do feelings of jealousy arise when you see someone else succeed? It's not something to feel ashamed of, it's part of being human. What the Buddha offers isn't simply a command to suppress these feelings, but rather a way to transform them. He encourages us not to fight the negativity directly, but to focus on cultivating the positive. Instead of simply trying to eliminate anger, for example, the Buddha suggests we actively nurture qualities like love, kindness, and patience. These qualities don't just show up in our lives by accident. They need to be cultivated, practiced, and strengthened over time. It's a bit like trying to replace an old habit with a better one. If you've ever tried to quit smoking, for instance, you know it's hard. But it becomes a bit easier when you focus on replacing the habit with something healthier, like exercise or breathing exercises. This process of cultivating the good isn't always easy. The Buddha didn't sugarcoat it. We can't expect to simply will ourselves into kindness, patience, or compassion. These virtues take time and effort to develop. You may falter, you may struggle, and there will be moments when you fall back into negative habits. But the important thing is to keep going. Don't give up. With consistent practice, these qualities can become part of your nature, gradually transforming the way you interact with the world. Now, let's move on to the second part of the teaching: cultivate the good. In this step, the Buddha challenges us to develop virtues that promote peace and happiness, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. We're talking about things like unselfishness, compassion, dedication, and courage. These qualities are the antidote to the negativity that can cloud our minds and influence our actions. But let's be honest, these aren't always easy to practice. Patience is one of those virtues that is especially hard to cultivate. It's far easier to become frustrated, especially when we're dealing with people or situations that try our nerves. However, the Buddha's teachings encourage us not to let these difficulties turn us away from the path. Instead, we're encouraged to keep cultivating patience and compassion, even when it feels challenging. Over time, this practice can make a profound difference in the way we experience life. Our anger and frustration can start to give way to tolerance and understanding. Courage is another essential quality to cultivate. Courage isn't just about facing physical danger. It's about having the bravery to face our own inner darkness, our fears, our insecurities, and our doubts. It's about choosing to act in alignment with our highest values, even when doing so feels difficult or uncomfortable. Cultivating courage might mean speaking up for what's right when others are silent, or choosing to forgive someone who has hurt you, even though it's hard. Finally, let's explore the third part of the Buddha's teaching: cleanse the mind. This is where the Buddha's wisdom shines brightly. He compares the mind to a clear sky, bright and pure in its natural state. However, just as clouds can cover the sky, so too can defilements such as greed, hatred, and delusion cloud the mind. These defilements make the mind impure, and they lead us to act in ways that cause suffering. The key to cleansing the mind is not through force or struggle, but through the cultivation of those positive qualities we've already discussed: love, kindness, patience, compassion, and so on. As we actively practice these virtues, we begin to clear away the mental fog that clouds our perception. When we practice mindfulness, for example, we become more aware of the thoughts and emotions that arise in our minds. We can notice when negativity takes hold, and instead of reacting impulsively, we can choose to respond with wisdom and compassion. Over time, this practice restores the mind to its original clarity and purity, much like a sky that, once the clouds pass, becomes bright again. The beauty of this teaching lies in its universality. Whether or not you follow a particular religion, or even if you don't adhere to any spiritual path at all, these principles can still be applied. The Buddha's teachings are rooted in human experience. They aren't confined by dogma or tradition. They offer practical tools for creating a life of peace, happiness, and harmony. By avoiding evil, cultivating the good, and cleansing the mind, you are choosing to walk a path that leads to greater peace and fulfillment. And this isn't a one-time thing, it's a lifelong practice. Every day is an opportunity to begin anew, to commit to doing good, to cultivating love and kindness, and to cleansing our minds of negative thought patterns. When we dwell in evil, when we hold on to anger, greed, or resentment, we sow the seeds of suffering in our own hearts. But when we commit to something better, we receive something better in return: peace, joy, and the ability to live in harmony with others. To summarize the Buddha's core teaching, avoid all evil, cultivate the good, and cleanse the mind. This is the essence of the Buddha's advice, a guide for living a life filled with happiness and peace. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Each small step we take on this path brings us closer to a life that is more in tune with our deepest values and desires for true peace. So, as you go about your day, take a moment to reflect on these teachings. What small actions can you take today to avoid negativity, to cultivate goodness, and to cleanse your mind? By integrating these principles into your life, you'll find that the world around you begins to shift in ways you may not have expected, toward more love, more peace, and more happiness. Thank you for listening, and I hope you find these teachings helpful as you continue your journey.